speak Arabic like all Arabs. They're predominantly, but not exclusively, predominantly Muslim, like most Arabs. And they enjoy a culture that's very similar to, with some regional differences, to Arabs everywhere else. So, even in 1964, Arafat referred to them as an integral part of the Arab nation. So they were simply Arabs who lived in Palestine. However, in 1968, the PLO Charter establishes a Palestinian people who are going to fight for a Palestinian homeland. That's the first time we get Palestinians. They had been referred to as Palestinians before that, but they were Palestinian Arabs. Yes, Zisel. You'd like to point out when the earliest settlers came to Palestine, they needed farm labor, and they imported a lot of Iraqis. And those are the parents of the current Palestinians. Thank you. Okay, so now let's take a look. Yes, Evie. I remember before Israel was a state, Jordan had on its airplane the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan, the Palestinian state. They are claiming a state in Israel. Okay, but Evie says they're Jordanians. We're going to look at that in just a minute. Okay, so now that we've defined those two terms, let's take a look at the history. So, Gaza, which is this area here, this is Israel, this is Gaza here. It's known as today as the Gaza Strip. And it's a little area on the west coast. You have the Mediterranean Sea here. And Gaza, the city, is right here. And so originally when people spoke about Gaza, they spoke about the city of Gaza. It then becomes the Gaza Strip later on, and we'll talk about that. So at first, this area here was inhabited by Canaanites. Okay, that makes sense to us. This was Canaan, right? Before the Israelites get here, this is Canaan. And it goes back 4,000 years. We, Jews, go back how long? 5,000, 3,000, 2,000. Do I hear? Zisel. Okay, well, so let's see. Okay, this is 2025. Okay, what's the earliest date we can absolutely be sure of? We think, for us. Yes, Zisel. So the earliest date that we can pretty much verify is King David, which is 1000 BCE, which is here. King David lived around 1000. How do we know that? Because we have a little piece of pottery recovered from that time that says, from the city of David. If it's from the city of David, probably there was a David, right? Other than that, we don't have any other concrete evidence that King David existed. We don't have any other concrete evidence that... All right. And we have the Merneptah Stele from Egypt, which says the Pharaoh Merneptah had conquered Israel. So we can definitely say around 1000, and probably earlier, right? Because if our legends are true, then before David, obviously, we had Moses, and we had some other things. We had Abraham. So let's say 1500 BCE. So if we have 1500 BCE, and we're in let's say 2000 to make it easy, that's 3500. Okay? So 3,500-ish kind of sort of years. All right. So after the Canaanites, the Egyptians conquer the Canaanites. And then the Philistines, in the 12th century, take it away from the Egyptians. And Gaza becomes a Philistine stronghold. And then right after the Philistines in the 12th century, that's the 12th century, or what years, approximately? The what years? The 1100 years, right? Okay, and then you have King David after that, at 1000. So this is David and Goliath. If it ever happened, this is David and Goliath, right? The Philistines had the territory, then King David gets it. The Israelites are fighting the Philistines. The Philistines send out their consummate warrior, Goliath. King David takes a slingshot, and we know the story. Okay, that's yes. From the beginning of creation. So the question was, why are we in the year 5700? What? 5786. And I said, because creation. We date it from creation. Okay, so we have King David. And then we know the Assyrians conquer the northern kingdom in 721. And under Sargon II, the Assyrians try to conquer Judea, or Judah at that time, the southern kingdom. They don't get it because there is a coup against Sennacherib, and Emperor Sennacherib, and he has to run back to Nineveh, the capital of Assyria, and make sure his throne is protected. And so Hezekiah, the king at the time, can rest easy. But our Bible says that Sennacherib had Hezekiah caged like a bird. And this is why we have the Siloam tunnels, Hezekiah's tunnels, in order to bring water from the Siloam spring into Jerusalem, because he knew that Sennacherib would lay siege. So he made a secret tunnel so that they wouldn't, so that they could still get water inside Jerusalem. Okay, so that's the Assyrians. And then after the Assyrians, Alexander the Great conquers the area in 332. Okay, so we know Alexander the Great dies very young, in his early 30s. So then what happens to Alexander the Great's empire? Alexander had amassed a huge, huge empire in the ancient world. It was divided up among his generals. Very good. He had 5 generals, and it was divided up among his 5 generals. However, 2 of the 5 were far more powerful than the other 3, Ptolemy and Seleucus. And so Ptolemy got the western half, Seleucus got the eastern half. Guess who was right in the middle? And guess who everybody wanted? Why? Because we're at the crossroads of everything. If you imagine a map where Israel is, we're right in the center of everything. To go north, you got to go through us. To go south, you got to get through us. To go west, you got to get through us. We're right in the middle of everything, and everybody wanted us. Okay, so Gaza and the territory that we now call Israel passes through Ptolemy's hands, to Seleucus' hands, back to Ptolemy's hands, to Seleucus' hands. This is what the entire story really of Hanukkah is about, right? Because what does Seleucus do? The Seleucus and the Greek Syrians, who were on the eastern side, invade Israel because they want to get it. The Maccabees fight back. It had been under the Ptolemy's hands, right? What Ptolemy did, who was the Greek general, he installed himself as the pharaoh in Egypt, and then we had Greek pharaohs. Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt, was Greek. She wasn't Egyptian. She was a Greek pharaoh of the Ptolemaic dynasty. So Gaza and Israel passed through Ptolemy, Seleucus, Ptolemy, Seleucus, Ptolemy, Seleucus, until the Hasmoneans take it. Now, once again, who are the Hasmoneans? Good. Maccabees. Who said that? Good. The Hasmoneans are the Maccabees. Yes. And the word Hasmonean comes from a very early Maccabean ruler. And so they just take that name for their dynasty. But these are the Maccabees. I have an obscure question. Very often you hear people trying to rewrite history. It's okay. Sorry.
So there was even a program that Cleopatra was black because she was considered Egyptian. Egypt is part of Africa.
There was even a program that concluded that Cleopatra was black because Egypt was part of Africa.
So I also knew that Cleopatra was part of the
Ptolemy.
I knew that, but why aren't there historians that get up and say this history that they're trying to promote is incorrect?
So why aren't there historians that stand up and say some histories are wrong? Because people make money from writing things, and there are people who write that, look, guys, this is all conspiracy theory. This is ridiculousness. Cleopatra was Greek. I mean, there's zero controversy about that. She was Greek, period.
But the reason I am saying this, there is another reason why I'm saying this, because so much history at this point, and especially about Israel, has been rewritten,
Yes.
erroneous,
Yes.
and nobody stands up
Yes.
and says,
So much history has been rewritten, especially about Israel, promoting wrong ideas. That is very true. That is very true. On the other hand, look, we are Jews, but we're all educated Jews. And we do have to understand that not everything that we believe about Israel may in fact be true. And I'm going to point some things out today when we get there. And sometimes we have to deal with harsh realities as intelligent people. Okay, so, yes. So where does the first temple come in? Good. So when is the first temple built? Who builds it? Solomon. Remember, David doesn't get to build the first temple. Why? Say again. Too bloody and his affair with Bathsheba. But too bloody is the primary reason. Yes, God says, no. Solomon builds it. When does Solomon live? 970-ish. 970-ish is Solomon. So that's the first temple is built. It's destroyed between the Assyrians and the Greeks by the Babylonians in 586. And that ends the Jewish kingdom. When King Zedekiah is taken away in chains into Babylonia in exile, that ends the Jewish kingdom. Now, that's, thank you for asking that, because that brings up a point. Once the Jewish kingdom ends in 586, that means we no longer controlled the land. So, how long did we control the land? We had it for sure in 1000, and we probably had it earlier than that, if our stories about Abraham are true. And then it was gone in 586, and then we kind of sort of had it a little bit off and on and not. We were occupied by other people, but we were the majority population of the land. When does that not happen anymore? Definitely it doesn't happen by 600 and Islam. So let's say we have the year 1000 King David, that's 1,000 years to CE, and then another 600 years for Islam. So let's say we had it for 1,600 years. King David to the advent of Islam, 1,600 years. Then what we have to do is take a deep breath and understand how long Islam controlled the land. They controlled it from 600 to 1948. 1,350 years. Almost just about as long as we had it. So, you can understand why Islam and Muslims get really angry. We say it's our land. They say, excuse me, we had it for as long as you did. It's our land. And we were the last ones to have it. And as Jews, you have to take a deep breath and say, okay, look, I don't agree with them, but I understand where they're coming from. Islam controlled the land as the majority population for as long as we did. Now, I'm not saying I'm 100% pro-Israel and 100% pro-Jewish, but we also have to be intelligent adults and look at the facts. Okay, there was one question somewhere. Cecil again? So Cecil says, Islam likes to point out that any territory that Islam had still belongs to Islam. And Cecil's not wrong. That's a medieval precedent that is not embraced by many normative Muslims, but it is embraced by fanatical Muslims. And it has to do with two areas. Islam, these are medieval rulings. There is an area that's called Dar al-Harb and Dar al-Islam. Lands that are not yet conquered and lands that belong to Islam. And the medieval precedent says, if a land was under Islam and falls out of Islam, then it must be returned to Islam. Now, that is not embraced by a number of normative Muslims in the world. However, it is, in fact, a ruling that is still embraced by fanatical Muslim sects. So Gary has a historical philosophy. Who owns the land?
And this is worldwide. Who owns the land is who controls the land.
Who owns the land is who controls the land. But that may not be in perpetuity, but it's in reality.
Yeah, I have a question about Spain. If that's the case, because the Moors were in Spain,
Of course.
and the Moors were not
Of course. Yes. So Rosalie says, well, what about Spain? It used to be Muslim. Why aren't they going after that? Yes, 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 yes. 100% correct. Now, I just want to address Gary's point. Who owns the land is who controls it. That's not what the UN says. The UN, under UN Resolution 242, says if you acquire land by war, it's not yours. You are an occupying force. It doesn't belong to you. Okay, well, tell that to Putin. Okay? It just seems to always come up with Israel, but it doesn't come up with anybody else. All right. So, Alexander the Great has it in 332, then the Seleucids, the Ptolemies, then the Hasmoneans take it in 96 for the Hasmonean dynasty. When the Hasmonean dynasty ends, the Romans administer Gaza starting in 66. Then the Muslim conquerors take it starting in 637. So remember, the easiest year we assigned the spread of Islam and Muhammad, 600. It's not precise, but it's like, okay, I can remember 600 CE is Muhammad and Islam. And then the area gets taken back by the Crusaders. So remember that in 1100 we have the First Crusade. And it is designed, the First Crusade is designed to wrest, W-R-E-S-T, wrest Israel and Jerusalem from the hands of Islam. That was the whole purpose of the First Crusade. Along the way, many Jews are murdered, and people signed on like crazy to go with the First Crusade. If 1100 CE, what are you doing? You're a guy, you got a wife, you got 4 kids, you're out plowing your fields. You come home, you see your wife, you see your kids, you have dinner, you get up the next morning, you go out and you work your fields. And when you get done, you come home and you see your wife and you see your kids and you go to sleep. And then the next day you get up and you go out and you work your fields. Okay, you get the picture. So when this group comes into town saying, we're going to the Holy Land, come on a crusade with us, this is exciting stuff, go get your sword, let's go. And you know, all these men, they're like, oh yeah, okay, I'm going. You know, in a way, it's like, you know, we fault it now, but, and COVID was probably to blame for part of it, but you see so many men in their 30s and 40s playing video games for hours and hours on the weekends. Why? Because it gets them out into something exciting, right? They're fighting. They're fighting, they're going to war, they're... Little segue here. Remember when the Second Temple is destroyed, all right? Up until that time, what was the male primary occupation? We were soldiers and we were hunters, all right? Yeah, certainly before... farmers too, and then before that, hunters. Yes. And what did those two things do on a very basic hormonal level? It allowed men to get out of themselves, to use the testosterone that was building up in their systems. Okay? You laugh at it, but if you are a man, you understand. Testosterone builds up, and that's why sometimes we get aggressive. We got to do stuff because that's what testosterone does, and it's a very good thing. It makes men men, right? Women, it's hard for you to understand, but it is in fact the case. So, the second temple gets destroyed. We cannot go to war anymore. We're not being hunters anymore. So what are we going to do with that testosterone? It's a real problem. And what do the rabbis end up doing? Remember, before the second temple is destroyed, my son the hunter, my son the warrior. Now you ask, where did we get my son the scholar, my son the violin player, my son, well, the doctor, yes. And the rabbis say, look, we got to get the men in there praying 3 times a day. You know, they will go crazy if we don't give them something to do. They have to be like directed. Okay, you have to do this, and then you have to do this, and you have to do this. And that's why the institution, on a practical level, the rabbis will have many other reasons why the men are required to pray 3 times a day. But on a practical level, it's like, look, we got to get the men under control because they're going to go crazy out there. And they were right. They were right. Okay, so the Crusaders have about a 100-year party, and then they are gone because Saladin comes back and reinstitutes Islam. And that goes all the way until the British Mandate ends in 1917. The British Mandate begins, in 1917. And remember that Muslim Arabs, Palestinian Arabs, all that time were the majority population on the land. There were Jews there, but we were in a distinct minority. There were some very pious Jews who were studying Torah and, but we were a distinct minority. The majority population was absolutely Muslim. And this is the entire problem with Israel and the Arabs. It's who is the majority population? When the aliyot begin to happen from Eastern Europe, late 1800s, early 1900s, you have Jews from Eastern Europe, from Russia, who are saying, we're going to go resettle our homeland. We're going to go settle our homeland, right? And they come marching into Israel, and they're the Arab majority population. We're going to settle our homeland. What? You're going to do what? What? No, this is our land. We've been here for the last 1,000 years. No, you're not going to do that. Thank you very much. No. Well, there were Jews who had a lot of money. They bought land. They bought up large parcels of land. And little by little by little, they started becoming more populous. As soon as the Arab population saw the Jewish population as a threat to replace them as the majority population, then the tensions grew very, 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 very large, huge. And this is why there were tensions all through the Middle East. This is why, for instance, Britain introduced the White Paper in 1939 because there were too many Jews who were going to Palestine. And the Arab population was furious. They didn't want the Jewish population to become the majority population. All right. So we have the British Mandate that starts in 1917. Okay. And the British Mandate starts in 1917 because of the end of World War I, right? And how does World War I end? The Allies beat the Axis powers. The what? The breakup of the Ottoman Empire. Say again? Austria-Hungary. It's the Treaty of Versailles. The Treaty of Versailles in 1919 ends the First World War. And the Ottoman Empire, which had controlled this entire area, then gets split up among the victors. And the two primary recipients are France and England. France basically gets the East plus Turkey, and Britain basically gets the West, including what is today Israel. There's another important happening, Cecil says, historically. The Tsar is gone in 1917, yes, the Russian Revolution in 1917. Thank you very much. Excellent. And the beginning of Stalin, yes. Lenin first and then Stalin, yes. What? Automobiles. The need for oil. It changes because of the need for natural resources and oil. Yeah, I think that certainly does become important as time goes by and we get mass production of the automobile that needs gasoline. Yeah, I think 1917 is a little bit early for that, but your point, I think, is a good point. And the wealth of the Arab nations, yes, suddenly explodes. I think it took a little bit longer than that, but your point is very well taken. That over time, over the next decades, yes, that does become very important because we had our own natural resources, and there weren't that many cars at that time. Lawrence of Arabia. The Arabs were all fighting each other, and he united them. Correct. And then Nasser will come in a big way. Gamal Nasser, the United Arab League. Yes. Correct. Right. Turkish is not the same as Arabic, and the Turks treated the Palestinian Arabs very badly. Right. Correct. Yes. So you have a friend in Mexico who's mad at the Israelis. Yeah, except that there's a religious component here. There's a religious component here that isn't there in the Mexican scenario. That Jerusalem is regarded as a holy site for both peoples. Yes, it is. It's the third holiest site in Islam. But it's not even mentioned. You are correct. But they consider it the third holiest site, and they are gonna hold on to that belief until, yes. So the British get the mandate in 1917. This is what happens after the British mandate. Great Britain divides the territory up into Transjordan on the east and Palestine on the left. Gaza is right in there, but it's not a problem yet. This is what the British do. They create this area here called Transjordan, and then Palestine is on the left. That's in 1921. This is what the situation looks like. Okay. What happens then is that in 1929, we have riots in Jerusalem. And it has to do with access to the Western Wall. Same way we have situations now with access to the Western Wall. Jews wanted access to the Western Wall. The Arabs, the Palestinians will say were upset, and they killed a number of Jews because we were agitating to get access to the Western Wall. Cecil.
I think it's important in understanding history that when the Brits went ahead and divided the land and Transjordan, they imported a minor relative or a king of Saudi Arabia and installed him as the king of the new Transjordanian land, and it was King Abdullah the first.
Yes, and what ended up, so Cecil says that when Britain created this area, they basically created a self-government for Transjordan. They were still involved a little bit, but they mostly let the area of Transjordan govern itself. Lana. Which is the first Palestinian state? I would kind of argue that too a little bit, yes. I don't think the Russian Revolution affected the population of Israel only to the extent that no. So okay, we're going to get to this stuff next week then. So let me just so what happens in the Russian Revolution? 1917, Nicholas and Alexandra are deposed and executed. The entire Russian royal family is gone. Who takes over? Lenin and the Bolsheviks. All right. Jews were pretty happy about this. Why? Because we had been persecuted. We were like the lowest member of the on the totem pole in Russia. We were just the low of the low of the low. Poverty, and we had no rights. It was terrible. What did communism say? What did Lenin and the Bolsheviks say? Everybody's equal. Well, if you were up on top and you were in the nobility, you didn't like it very much because everyone was equal and you had been way above everybody for a long time. But if you're the low man on the totem pole, you're like, oh yeah, we like this. Because then we go right up the totem pole to the middle, like everybody else. Now we're the same as everybody else. So the Jews were in pretty good shape right after the Russian Revolution. You'll recall that once they are deposed, you had the White Army and the Red Army. Right? The Red Army was loyal to the Bolsheviks. The White Army was loyal to the Tsar. And there was war. The Red Army ultimately wins, and the Bolsheviks take over, and they install a government that embraces a communist philosophy. And the Jews do pretty well until Stalin. And then all hell breaks loose. Stalin is a monster, right? So Stalin is a monster. And then we have some exodus out of Russia, but there were a lot of people who weren't able to get out of Russia. Then we had the beginnings of the Aliyot to Israel, right? And these were from Eastern Europe and Russia, but these weren't huge numbers of people. They were definitely enough to make the Arabs upset, but this wasn't like a huge mass transfer of population. Going back to the riots. The Grand Mufti, Britain appointed, yes. And the Grand Mufti was a friend of Hitler, absolutely correct. And so when the Grand Mufti said to America, we don't like all of these Jews coming in. They are displacing us. They are becoming the majority population. We're not going to tolerate that. We don't want that. Which is why we, America, introduced the Johnson-Reed Immigration Act of 1924, because the Grand Mufti had started complaining about it before that. What did the Johnson-Reed Immigration Act do? It restricted immigration, but it specifically restricted immigration to Jews. It didn't say that in the language, but the effect of it absolutely was to limit immigration to Jews, right? So we had many Jews coming to America through Ellis Island and through other areas, Charleston, there were other, Galveston, yes. And all of a sudden, the number was restricted down to 10,000, which was like nothing. Why? Because we didn't want to agitate. Great Britain institutes the white paper and restricts immigration to Palestine. We restrict immigration here, and we didn't want to get the Grand Mufti upset. So we acquiesced. So you're absolutely correct about that. Absolutely correct.
Hitler thought that he was doing the world a favor, and the world really behaved as if Hitler was doing a favor.
Yes. Let me end with this. Let me just end with this, okay? So World War I comes to an end. Versailles Treaty is signed, 1919. And then what does Versailles Treaty say? It says Germany is responsible for the war, and Germany has to pay war reparations, right? So what was the sentiment in Germany at the time? The Germans were humiliated. They were humiliated. They had no sense of self anymore. They were the laughingstock of the world, which allows you to understand how a monster like Hitler is able to rise up through the ranks and ascend to power. Because what did he say? He said, all of you, are Germans who are descended from the Nordic gods. You were destined for greatness in this life. And what are you doing? You're sitting here moping. You're being humiliated. You have no sense of who you are. You are descended from the Norse gods. Now stand up and get yourself together. I mean, you can hear him. You could literally, in my voice, please God. But you could see. And the German people said, yeah. And they followed him, and then we know what happened next. But Germany was humiliated. And they wanted desperately to feel good about themselves again. And Hitler had learned that an anti-Semitic platform, he learned it from the mayor of Vienna, Karl Lueger, who won mayorship 3 times on an anti-Semitic platform. And he said, that's how I'll do it. I'm going to go after Jews. And everyone's going to line up behind me for a common cause. And clearly it worked. right? All right, I have stayed way over time. We're going to go through the modern situation of how Gaza got into the situation that it is. We have gotten through all the ancient stuff, and then we'll get through the partition plan. Okay, have a wonderful week, everyone. Wonderful to be back. Nice to see you all. Hello, Rabbi.
Take a photo of that so you'll have it. Blow it up. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Of course, of course, of course. I wanted this so much, and I can't wait till next week, and we get to actually talk. But, okay, so I have a question. Isn't Gaza further, like, where's Sinai in this? Okay, because, because.
Gaza, well,
Yeah, that business about the connection with Sinai is so weird. All of it's weird. All of it's weird to me. I don't understand. Oh, another thing.
I'll remember it. I've got it all written down, so we're okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So why do the Israelis call it Gaza versus Gaza?
Gaza?
Gaza instead of Gaza. We say Gaza in English, but they say Gaza.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Another question. Okay.
Thank you. I'm afraid to get too close to you. You were so
I have a really good, I just come in here and just have fun.
Yeah.
It's like, how much fun can I have? Take care.
Hi, thank you, Rabbi. Have a good week.
Ahoy, mateys. It's a little bit too loud. I'll keep it down here. I don't want to sound like he sounded at the end. Please join with us as I introduce myself. For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Rabbi Alexander. I'm one of the rabbis here at Adat Ariel. It's a beloved place for me, and I'm excited to be teaching with MID again this year. Thank you. So as you may know, generally, when I teach texts. I teach ethics in texts. I teach all different kinds of interesting stories in the Talmud. But I decided, with the help of Rosalie and Susie, to go a different direction, at least for part of this semester. And that is to learn a little bit about the Jewish pirates of the Caribbean. So that is what we are doing. So that's why I said ahoy, mateys, because we're going to be taking a look at a real history of Jews in what was called the New World. Now, many of you may have already learned some things about the Inquisition in Spain and in the countries around it. And I think that maybe Rabbi Goodman even has spoken about that. But in order for us to really understand what we're going to look at over this particular part of the MID year, we need to go back and understand how we got to Jewish pirates of the Caribbean with regard to the history of our people. So it'll be a combination of all those things. But before we get started with actual information that comes from me, we're going to watch a brief video. Can everybody see this? Can you all see this? Okay. We're going to watch a brief video on Jewish pirates of the Caribbean. But we'll do that right after we say the blessing for learning, because watching a video or studying a text or learning Jewish history is all part of learning. And it's a wonderful thing to be able to thank the one who created us to give us enough of a brain and also enough interest in things that go on around us to say the prayers. So let's go for it. The last three words are la'asok, just getting it back for you, la'asok b'divrei Torah. And the way I always say that is that since it's talking about immersing us in learning, la'asok is a really easy thing to remember because it's like soaking yourself in learning. So we'll say the blessing together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. You got it. So I am not out of the generation of the pirates, Jewish pirates of the Caribbean, obviously, but my technological knowledge is probably closer to theirs than to right now. So thank you again, and let's see if you can enjoy the beginning of the studies with this.
Treasure hunting, eye patch wearing yar swearing bad boys of the high seas. But did you know that centuries before Johnny Depp suited up as Jack Sparrow, there were Jews who operated under the sway of Jolly Roger? Who were these Jewish pirates of the Caribbean? What motivated them? And what kind of semi-kosher mayhem did they get into? It all started in 1492, when King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain expelled 200,000 Jews. This purge of the Jews came from a Christian clerk who wanted to stop traditional Jews from influencing conversos, Jews who had converted to Christianity. Oddly enough, the clerk himself had converso ancestors.
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition.
But we guess that didn't stop. A number of these exiled Spanish Jews decided to seek revenge from their anti-Semitic monarchs on the high seas. These long-bearded, sword-wielding, Spanish-speaking members of the tribe were like something out of an overblown Tarantino vengeance fantasy. There was even a pirate nicknamed the Great Jew. His actual name was Sinan Reyes, and he was second in command to the pirate Barbarossa, Italian for Redbeard, in the early 1500s. The duo attacked their fair share of Spanish merchant ships, but it wasn't all fun and games and bottles of kosher rum. In the early 1540s, the Great Jew's son was kidnapped at sea by King Charles V of Spain, and Redbeard recaptured the kidnapped boy in an epic series of attacks that included sacking a small Spanish town and blowing up a fort. Another Jewish pirate was Moses Cohen Henriquez, considered to be one of the most successful buccaneers ever. He was supposedly the brains behind one of the biggest pirate hauls in history, the 1628 capture of the Spanish Silver Fleet, a convoy of about 25 ships loaded with treasure returning from Spain's American colonies. Henriquez sailed with the Dutch West India Company admiral and low-key pirate Pete Hayne, whose anti-Spanish agenda was inspired by his time as a slave on a Spanish ship. The silver and gold the duo lifted in the raid is estimated to be worth over $1 billion today. Not bad for a day's haul. Henriquez was a pretty wild guy too. He established his own pirate island, where he schlepped and hid his fortune, continued to advise Hayne, and sailed the seven seas, eluding capture for the rest of his days. Other Jewish pirates were less tethered to the bad boy life. Jacob Curia, aka Diego Perez de Costa, was a converso Jew who commanded 3 pirate ships in the Caribbean seas, and spent a good decade or so pillaging unsuspecting Spanish vessels. And then, he found God. He repented for his marauding ways, became the first ever Baal Teshuvah pirate. Eventually, he made his way to the land of Israel, where he settled in Safed, a city in the Galilee, after becoming enthralled with the mystical teachings of Rabbi Isaac Luria, or the Arizal, the father of contemporary Kabbalah. Then there was the man known as the Pirate Rabbi, who terrorized the seafaring Spanish in the late 1500s, using part of his loot to found a community of Sephardic Jews in Amsterdam. The Pirate Rabbi supposedly kept kosher on the high seas, and may have even brought a chef along with him to make sure he wasn't eating trait. Jewish pirates tended to form partnerships with leading non-Jewish pirates of the day. This often led to remarkable crossovers of Jewish and pirate culture, including treasure maps written in Hebrew, ships with names like the Queen Esther and the Shield of Abraham, and tombstones in Jamaican Jewish cemeteries that bore the skull and crossbones. These seabound raiders fought for decades against the Spanish, attacking ships and sharing Spanish naval secrets with Spain's enemies, all while building up a mercantile network connecting trading posts around the globe. Some scholars shy away from using the term Jewish pirates, since a lot of the aforementioned people served in advisory roles to other leading pirates. But if we broaden the term to include buccaneers, smugglers, privateers, or, in Spanish, contrabandistas, there's a broad consensus that Jews at the time were involved in illegal trade and raid against the Spanish Empire. Maybe what we actually call them is not as important as just recognizing that they existed at all, and recognizing that the Jewish role in early mid-second millennia Caribbean maritime history was greater than we thought. These Jewish naval greats had profound influence on leading pirates at the time, and took their fate into their own hands by shooting back at the empire that tried to stomp them out. And many succeeded, which makes for some pretty thrilling stories of vengeance and self-determination, and highlights these pirates as colorful examples of Jews who stood up against their oppressors.
If you like what we're doing here, consider subscribing. And if there's something you want us to tackle in an upcoming video, let us know.
Okay, I need to turn it off. Hold on. And there we go. So, so, God, what the heck? What did you say, Ernie? I'm sorry. Yes. this is completely linked with the expulsion from Spain. Is that what you were asking? Yeah. So I am going to share a little bit with you today, but as you know, I'm always good for questions and other different information that people may have. One of the reasons that I showed you this particular video, which I thought was really well done, is because a number of the people that they listed quickly are people that we will take a look at more in depth as we move along. We will start with a particular kind of knowledge. Now, we saw this video. We saw that there were a lot of people functioning in one way or another linked to or themselves pirates. And we'll see a number of different ways that that plays itself out. And it's very little known. So it'll be a great thing for you to be able to learn about. However, it does say something in that video that I will reiterate pretty much over and over again. Why did these people, who were mostly usually involved in business and sale of different kinds of items, why would they change around and start to become people who were pirates of the sea? Pardon? So, like,
That was the only thing that was left for them.
right. So these are people who were either killed or expelled, depending on their choices, which we'll deal with in a moment, because of mostly, it will say Christian, but mostly it's because of the Catholic Church at that particular time, and the fact that they really wanted to cleanse their area of anybody who was not Catholic. So that is how it happened. So you're absolutely right, all of you who said this. We are dealing with people whose lives have been turned over so much, and we'll learn about that. And they were in such anger, rightly so, about what happened to their people, our people, during that time, that they had to find some way to be able to harm the Spanish king and queen particularly. So how did they travel around with valuable things in those days? Ships. We still do that, but that was their only option then. And so we'll begin to learn about these people. Any other questions or comments? Wait 1 second. I'll get Zisel and then come back up to you. Yes.
I have a question. In the video that we just saw, there was a list of Jews that were traveling and all that. I noticed one name, Abravanel.
Abramoville? Yeah, it's not the same. It's not the same guy.
I was asking if he's related to the rabbi Abravanel. He was an Abravanel, which is a little different from Abravanel, but it's
Okay, they're close names, but those names are not, they're pretty prevalent within the New World names of Jews. So they're similar, but they probably weren't related in any particular way. So, yes. There are, we'll find out. What? John Lafitte, his name was on there. He's known as a pirate. Some of the people that we learn about will be people who brought Jewish people on board to be with them, to be partners of them, and some of them actually, we'll find out, were actually Jewish to begin with. Lafitte Rothschild. Yeah. Yeah. So, any other questions? Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So I imagine it was a pretty lucrative trade and adventure for these people.
It was a lucrative trade and adventure for the people. They didn't do it alone. In other words, they cooperated with others who were also very upset about Spain, other countries, but there was only one country that they could really depend on, even though they were working with some of those other countries. So we'll get into that in a moment. Rosalie, and yes, wait one second.
Yeah, there were privateers that were coming out of Queen Elizabeth I. There were pirates, really, but they were called privateers. They were coming out of the support of Queen Elizabeth I of England. So I'm wondering if they cooperated with each other. Question one. Question two, what did they do with all the jewels and the gold and silver, whatever they were able to sack out of the Spanish galleons? What did they do with that? I mean, they became enriched, or they were able to share it with others? I mean, other countries? I mean, I'm just curious.
You'll find out.
Okay. I'll hold you to that.
Just how long did this go on for?
How long did this go on for? More than a century. More than a century in different kinds of ways. Yes. So good question.
Is there any truth to the allegation that there were some Jews aboard the Nina de Pinta?
Is there any factual information about that? Well, yes, there is. And you will know about that too. There's even more than that. Let's just say that, okay? Even more than the kind of hints that we have had about Columbus' background, about who was on the ships. All of that will come to the fore, mateys.
Just a little tidbit of that. I'm adding.
Oh, you're going to add?
Yeah, I'm going to add, yes. Not only were there Jews on board, including the translator, Luis de Torres, but they sailed the night, Tisha B'Av, but it was the night that we were kicked out of Spain, and that's not a coincidence.
Well, now I can be done with the class. Thank you. No, Cecil, I'm going to move on now and teach for a little bit.
One of my colleagues here said, he said there was a translator. You know what Hebrew was and why was he a translator? Because he knew Hebrew. And they all thought that eventually some people would speak Hebrew, so he was a translator.
There was a translator on the ship that Columbus, one of the ships that Columbus sailed. That is something that people think is the case, and we'll have a lot of different kinds of viewpoints about the use of Hebrew during this period of time. Now, I will begin. Pardon? I said attempt. I'll be attempt. So, some of the material that I got came from a Jewish person who moved to Jamaica. And he was so interested in the fact that he was now living in Jamaica, he wanted to find out a lot of the history. And because of that, Jamaica was a central point of both shipping in general and piratery specifically. And so he found a pirate's journal. And in the pirate's journal, while he was invading Jamaica in 1643, the pirate William Jackson found the island's capital deserted. So he got to Jamaica, went to the island's capital, and was extremely surprised that there was really hardly anybody there. And he said the place was deserted except for diverse Portuguese of the Hebrew nation who came seeking asylum. And so those were the only people in that capital time, at the time in 1643, that he meant to go there and to be part of a raiding process. And smartly, of the Portuguese Jews who were there, they promised to show the pirate where the Spaniards hid their gold. So that makes sense, because if they are hiding from the Inquisition, which indeed they were, and they were amongst only the people who were in that area, they didn't want to get into a situation where this pirate that they didn't know would find out that all these Jews were living there. And so what they had to do was do what you need to do with a pirate, which is, don't worry about it, we'll make sure you get some gold. So that is what happened at the beginning. And I found that really quite amazing, because what happened was, in that city, people knew that pirates were coming, and so they left to go somewhere else in order to be able to hold on to their goods and also to not become slaughtered by another pirate, right? These were all pirates. But the Jews had no choice, because there really wasn't anywhere else that they could go at that particular time. And so instead, it was the first thing that's ever been written about a cooperation between a Jewish community and a pirate, okay? So it was early thought that the New World adventure was the province of Spanish and Portuguese conquistadors, who were all devout Catholics carrying the cross. So, seeing Portuguese Jews on a Spanish island seeking asylum with an English pirate, which is what William Jackson was, those of you who are talking about Britain and pirates there, it was strange. Before England conquered Jamaica in 1655, so about 10 years later, the island that we're talking about right now that he wrote about belonged to the family of Christopher Columbus, who provided a haven for Jews expelled in the New World. Now, a lot of us over time, and there's pros and cons to all of these discussions, but a lot of us don't have the full information about that. Well, the full information about that leads us to a perspective that at least this guy was somebody who cared enough about the Jews that were going through the Inquisition after the Inquisition started, that he opened up his own land for people to be there. So it was told that Columbus was a Jew. When this man got to Jamaica in the 1960s, one of the first things he learned as a part of a small Jewish community is the first thing they said, which all of you are, or most of you are saying, which is Columbus was Jewish. So current Jamaican Jews, meaning like from the 60s to now, who had family living there for a really long time, they traced their ancestry to the first settlers and the people who were part of Columbus' family. This is interesting. I thought it was interesting. Is it interesting? So, pardon, were they Caucasian? Well, I think they're as much Caucasian as one can talk about people who are from the New World, because the New World has a number of different places in it. It includes places like Mexico, and it includes places like Spain and Portugal, and you know, I can't suggest that all of the people were Caucasian, even in the Jewish community, and we all know that we have a span of different racial Jewish people. So it was a great thing to discover for these people who were living there that the Jews were explorers, conquistadors, cowboys, and pirates. And that's what we're learning now. So all of them came disguised. What did they come disguised as? Christians. They came disguised as Christians because what happened, obviously, in Spain and Portugal and all the rest of the countries is something that we will talk about some more, which I think many of you know about, which is they were either forced to become Catholic during the Inquisition, or they could leave, or if they were there and they had converted to Catholicism, if they had a hint of still holding on to their Jewish identity privately, or somebody outed them, what would happen? They would get burned at the stake or killed in some other way. So the Christians came, but the Jewish reasons for choosing unusual careers was different than anybody else's. The Christians who came, as so many different countries were, so all of them were Christian countries, almost, unless they were Moors or something like that, the Christians came to do what? When you got to a new land, what did you want to do? Well, convert everybody, but also other things in terms of the country that you serve. Conquering. So they came to conquer. They came to convert the heathen, as you just said. They came to search for gold. And then the last thing, they came to collect a bevy of Indian women to steal and to take back with them. The Jews came to escape persecution and to settle a land that was far away from inquisitors. Okay? So, let's get to Columbus for one introductory minute. When Columbus sailed, it is said that Jews were among his crew. Secret Jews sailed with many explorers, however, not just in Columbus ships. In just about every ship that sailed, there were a number of people who were conversos, were people who had become Catholics but were still observing Judaism secretly. If they were not married, if they did not have children, their absolute best bet was to get on a ship and become part of the ship's workers, no matter whether they were high level or not. Because once a ship was at sail, it would not be a good response of people on the ship to start to doubt somebody who also has a role on the ship. So the ship becomes its own little island, its own little country. And many, many people who were on the ship who were not conversos came to understand that some of the people that they were with were fleeing the Inquisition, but there doesn't seem to have been any problem with the people that you were with on the ship. So, just one second. I took all of these notes and I want to make sure. Okay. So, as I just said, they were mostly conversos. They were acting as though they were new Christians. And they also had a special name for themselves if they were on these ships. The name that they gave themselves was Esperandos. Pardon? Yes. Hopeful ones who expected, this is very interesting, they created a viewpoint that one day soon the Messiah would come, and that the Messiah, he, like them, would come in the guise of a new Christian. Why did they want that? They wanted that because they hoped that when the Messiah would come, the Messiah would forgive them for their apostasy. And the only way that they knew that somebody would forgive them for saying that they were another religion whilst hiding their own was if that person who was the Messiah understood what they were going through. So, it's pretty interesting, right? Oh, we're good. Oh, we're good. So, any comments so far?
Were the children also going, or just adults? I mean, you said families would stay back.
Yes. On those sailing ships, there weren't women or children. These. Did they marry any indigenous men along? Because they were all men coming over, and they had certain needs. Well, I don't know. I would imagine so. I know it happened in other parts of history when things like this were happening. You might marry an indigenous person. It happens all the time. So I'm going to say yes, but I'm not going to say yes because I already know what's true about this specifically. But you know, let's just talk about it for 1 second. And I just want to say I'm part of that background. You're part of that background? You've got Spanish blood. Oh, aren't we all married to pirates? So, yes.
One of the reasons that Jews in different parts of the world looked like the rest of the population was because when we first got to these lands, we were cohabiting with the natives.
Okay, so one of the reasons that different generations of Jews don't always look the same is because when we got to new places, obviously people did marry people who were indigenous to whatever area they were going to. So what were our people? I said it at the beginning, we were a mercantile people. And the Jews in the New World went about their business as traders and ship owners, and they became, historically, the first merchant class in the Spanish Empire. In other words, the first people who were selling goods further than their initial place that they lived. And so, as long as they pretended to be Catholic and delivered the goods, no one questioned them too closely. Why not? Because people needed mercantile assistance. They needed things to be shipped from one place to the other. So if it's a choice between a government or people being able to earn more money because this group of people are doing it, then they're going to just stay away from it. Yes?
I would think they were recognized
Ah, well, people who were conversos could not, like the pirate, they could not always observe dietary laws. I think that most of you know this, but most of the conversos, not even talking about the pirate conversos, most of the conversos in Spain, and when the Inquisition moved to Portugal, and when the Inquisition moved beyond that all over the New World, they would hide completely. And we'll learn a little bit more about that. They would hide completely, but the way that they did things was, if they were still trying to hold on to their Jewish traditions and identity, they would close all the curtains in their house. They would light Shabbat candles underneath something in their house so nobody would be able to see flickering lights anywhere. They did a number of different things. I mean, that's just one example, but they did as much as they could do. When I did my rabbinic thesis before becoming a rabbi, I did a thesis about conversos. And so one of the things that was really great that happened is that even like hundreds of years later, if somebody came to a body of rabbis and said, I'm part of a converso family, I just want to go back to my religion of origin, they would be very, very, very easygoing on them. Because if their family for up to 500 years has been taught to be a certain way that came initially out of fear, they didn't want to stop people from coming back into the community. So we actually have that now. They're not pirates, but we actually have that now. If you take a look in New Mexico and Arizona, and I think when I was first at Adat Ariel, I actually brought in a speaker for a weekend about this, to come and talk about people who had just realized that they came from a Jewish family, and that during the Inquisition, their family was changed from that. 1, 2.
To do with Inquisition. I'm sorry, but it has nothing to do with Inquisition. But after the change, I'm from Czechoslovakia originally, and after the change of the system from the communist to the free system, a lot of people who discovered some Jewish roots wanted to convert to Judaism, and it's the Jewish community now is made mostly of those people.
It's not the only time in our history when these things have occurred. What's most interesting about it is some of the ways they chose to be able to ride the wave, right? To be able to survive.
I'm just going to say, okay, you can repeat it if necessary. I have taken a group trip into Mexico some years ago, and the highlight of the trip was visiting some of the temples of conversos, and there are several of them in different parts of Mexico.
Okay, when you went to visit on a trip in Mexico, one of the highlights was seeing the synagogues that were created by people who had been conversos. Oh, it's all over. Oh, are you done? I'm sorry. If you're not done, keep talking.
No, I was going to say, even beyond what you were mentioning in the United States, I have the opportunity.
Outside the United States. Okay, Cecil, and then I want to finish up.
There's a town in Mexico named Venta Prieta, and they discovered
Venta Prieta. Prieta.
To sell something, but the meaning
Okay.
all the meanings, and Prieta is dark.
In Mexico, there's a street called Venta Prieta. A town called Venta Prieta.
Venta Prieta. And they discovered that they're Jewish. They were conversos.
Oh, they discovered the people who created that town were conversos.
All become Jewish and they imported the rabbi and blah, blah, blah. But that's what happened.
Okay, so this is what the Jews set up. They set up sugar factories. They pioneered grain, coffee, tea, traded sugar, tobacco, gold, silver. And who did they trade it with? Other hidden Jews on the Iberian Peninsula. So what they would do would be the people who delivered all of these goods, but they delivered all of these goods to other people that they could trust, and they sold them wherever they were. For most of the 16th century, everyone was content with the trade-off. The king needed the Jews to ensure cash flow. The Jews needed him to keep the Inquisition away. Once trade networks expanded, however, Jews were not as important anymore. So in other words, they started everything, and then people said, oh, like, we can do that too, and that's what happened. At the end of the 16th century, the Inquisition caught up with most of the people, from Mexico to Peru and more. And the inquisitors were called in to purify people. Jewish leaders were burned, their wealth confiscated, and the other people took over the rich silver trade. So they did what we have done through millennia. They tried to find another haven.
See, I found out a couple of months ago that my roots are as a converso, and my ancestor came over with Cortez, to Mexico. And what I learned is that the family grew wheat, because people mainly in Mexico were eating corn, because they had a lot of corn there. But they raised wheat in order to make challah. So I thought that was really interesting. And you mentioned they became farmers and all, and they were growing things, reminiscent of the old country. But, I had made a presentation about my own ancestry because I found out through Ancestry.com that, hey, Jewish roots. So I'm sure that what Zizel said about this little community, there are other communities in Mexico and in Latin America where Jews had escaped.
When they needed to look for another place, they start to conspire with Holland and England, who hated who? Spain, to seize a new world colony. Dutch Jews, inspired by a warrior rabbi, decided to change things. So you saw a tiny little bit about that, but there's so much more about this guy. They became a force in the early 1600s when Jews were forbidden in England, in France, in most of Europe, and there was only one place that they were safe and free: Holland. Amsterdam being the major city, and they called it New Jerusalem. Their mentors were their parents and their rabbi, Samuel Palash. Rabbi Palash, a Barbary pirate who was capturing Spanish ships when he was in his late 60s, for quite a long time, and into his late 60s, held religious services in his home. The aim of the parents was to live freely, grow wealthy in trade, have portraits painted by Rembrandt, and the ultimate goal was to bring down the Spanish Empire. The armies in this struggle were the Dutch, the English, and in the most successful assaults, the buccaneers of the West Indies. So, we'll learn the history of Sephardic Jews in the early New World with intrigue, with horror, with defeat, with survival and victory over the hooded inquisitors of the Holy Terror. And we'll also learn about the lost gold mine of Columbus, but that is to come. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful week.
Are we done? It's at 12? I thought there were 3 sections. There's only 2?
Oh, no, that's okay. No, it's okay. Before you leave, I was asked, hello. I was asked to make a presentation about the writing club because that would be part 3, but that's only once a month, the writing club. And we also play Maj, but not today, afterwards. So if you,
I tried to tell you that I read. Yes, I sang. I sang with you.
What did you say? I just wanted to thank you for talking about the Spanish Jews. I very seldom hear, of course, we're
This'll
such,
be a lot about that.
really, there's such a tiny, I don't know what,
Well,
but
stay tuned because
a,
this is
a
all about
percentage,
that.
a small percent, tiny percentage of the, the Ashkenaz and so forth. I did not know anyone except our butcher. I didn't know anyone of that. That
was from Spain?
here, no, that was Sephardic, and had that kind of background.
There's a Sephardic synagogue down the street.
Down the street. Could be, I don't know who they are, but yes. But I seldom hear anything like this quick. And yes, they had a rough time. Like this thing where you're saying how careful they had to be. Because if they didn't see smoke coming out of the chimney on the Shabbat, they would immediately they torture these people.
When was this? During the Inquisition?
During the Inquisition.
Yeah.
And that queen was a real nut brain.
Yeah, she was.
Crazy.
It's very funny because kids in American schools, when they used to learn about Columbus Day, they would say that it was Queen Isabella and Ferdinand and Isabella who asked him to go on the seas to get money, to discover new places for Spain. But when young kids like me in the 50s were learning about Columbus Day, we never knew that Ferdinand and Isabella were evil, disgusting
horrible
beings.
Yeah, I thought it excellent. I found out about Ferdinand because my ancestry is back there too. I'm a descendant of conversion also. And yeah, but mine took a different turn, in terms of indigenous side. But what I found out about Ferdinand.
I'm good. How are you?
Isabella was a real evil person. She's the one that pushed through this Catholicism. Ferdinand just went along with it. But there is suspicion that Ferdinand also had conversion blood in him.
Yes, there is
And
that.
they divided the realm in that Isabella took care of Spain and whatever was going on there, and Ferdinand is the one that looked beyond. And he's probably the one that was able to negotiate with
Well,
Columbus.
she's really the one who made all the rules regarding the Inquisition. But he didn't say no.